January 4th, 1945. Somewhere in the freezing forests of Belgium, General George S. Patton picks up a pen, opens his private diary, and writes 11 words that he never intended the world to see. Words that would sit buried for decades. Words that reveal something about the hero of the Battle of the Bulge that Hollywood never put in the movie. This isn't a story about Patton the legend. This is about Patton the man caught in his own handwriting, admitting something he desperately wanted to hide. To understand those 11 words, you have to go back 3 weeks, to a crossroads, to a field, to 84 American soldiers who never saw it coming. December 17th, 1944. The Battle of the Bulge has just erupted. Near the town of Malmedy, Belgium, a column of American trucks is rolling down a quiet road. Most of these men aren't even frontline infantry. They're artillery observers. Battery B of the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion. Rear echelon soldiers who think this is just another cold, miserable day in the war. Then German tanks appear out of the fog. A unit of Waffen-SS troops, part of Camp Peiper, led by a young, ambitious officer named Joachim Peiper. The Americans have no chance. After a brief firefight, they surrender. 113 men raise their hands. Peiper is in a hurry. He has a schedule to keep. A race to the Meuse River that could change the entire outcome of the German offensive. He doesn't have time for prisoners. He moves on ahead. But before he goes, he speaks briefly to one of his subordinate officers. And what happens next becomes one of the most infamous war crimes committed against American troops in the entire war. The American prisoners, are marched into a field. Machine guns are set up, and without warning, the SS opens fire. 84 men dead in the snow. But here's the detail that most documentaries leave out. It wasn't clean. It wasn't quick. German soldiers walked through the bodies afterward, finishing off the wounded with pistol shots to the head. Some Americans survived only because they had the nerve to lie perfectly still, playing dead among their murdered comrades for hours in the freezing cold. Word of the massacre spreads through the American ranks within days. And what happens next is where the story stops being simple. Because the anger doesn't just stay in the newspapers. It doesn't just stay in official protests filed through neutral Switzerland. It goes straight into the hearts of American soldiers holding the line in the Ardennes. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to subscribe, because the ending reveals something most history books barely mention. Within days, unofficial orders start spreading through American units. One document from the 328th Infantry Regiment states it in writing: no SS troops or paratroopers will be taken prisoner. They will be shot on sight. Think about that for a second. American soldiers, the good guys, the liberators, are now operating under an unwritten rule that mirrors the very war crime they're furious about. And it doesn't stay theoretical. January 1st, 1945, just over 2 weeks after Malmedy, near a small Belgian village called Chenogne, soldiers of the U.S. 11th Armored Division capture a group of surrendering German troops. Wehrmacht soldiers, not even the SS unit responsible for Malmedy, just regular German infantry, who threw up their hands like soldiers are supposed to when they've lost. They are marched into a field, and then they are executed. Eyewitness estimates put the number between 60 and 80 German prisoners, shot down by American machine guns. Roughly 1 German life for every American killed at Malmedy, a number too precise to be coincidence. One soldier who witnessed it, a man named John Feig, later wrote down what he saw. He described watching German prisoners lined up in groups of 25 or 30. He wrote that he knew what was about to happen and he hated it. He described the machine guns being set up and afterward, walking back down the road, looking into a field where, in his words, dark, lifeless forms lay in the snow. Feig wrote something else too, something that should stop you in your tracks. He said, in that moment, they were committing the same crimes they were now accusing the Japanese and the Germans of doing. This is where most versions of this story end. American troops, driven by grief and rage, cross a line, a tragic but understandable act of war. But that's not where the real story ends. Because the real story is about what happened after, about who found out, about who had the power to do something about it, and chose not to. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander, demanded a full investigation into Chenogne. The 11th Armored Division stonewalled it. Officers told investigators it was too late. The war was over. The unit had already been disbanded. There was nothing left to investigate. No charges were ever filed. But here's what most people don't know. Somebody else knew about it. Somebody far more powerful than a division commander. Somebody whose diary would later expose exactly how the American military machine really thought about all of this. General George S. Patton. On January 4th, 1945, just 3 days after the Chenogne Massacre, Patton sat down and wrote in his private diary. And this is where we come back to those 11 words. Patton wrote that American soldiers had, in his own words, also murdered 50-odd German prisoners. And then he added a sentence that tells you everything about the man behind the legend. He wrote, "I hope we can conceal this. Not, I'm horrified. Not, this must be investigated. Not even, this is regrettable, but understandable in war. I hope we can conceal this." This is the same George Patton who slapped shell-shocked soldiers in Sicily and was forced to publicly apologize. The same Patton whose Third Army captured over 1 million German soldiers and pushed further, faster than any other Allied force in Europe. The public Patton, pearl-handled revolvers, thunderous speeches. We're not just going to shoot the bastards. We're going to cut out their living guts. But here, in private, writing only for himself, Patton isn't thinking about justice. He's thinking about damage control. And here's the truly strange part. This wasn't the first time. Back in 1943, during the invasion of Sicily, 2 of Patton's own soldiers, Sergeant Horace West and Captain John Compton, had shot unarmed Italian and German prisoners of war. Real court-martial cases were opened, and historians who studied Patton's private writings say that even then, his instinct wasn't full transparency. It leaned toward minimizing the damage to his army's reputation, not maximizing accountability. So by the time Chenogne happens, a pattern is forming. A pattern the movies never show you. And it doesn't stop at the Battle of the Bulge either, because this thread runs all the way to the final months of the war. April 29th, 1945. American troops from the 45th and 42nd Infantry Divisions liberate Dachau concentration camp. What they find inside breaks something in them. Thousands of corpses, tens of thousands of starving, dying prisoners. In the chaos of liberation, American soldiers turn their weapons on SS camp guards. Somewhere between 30 and 50 guards are killed in what's now known as the Dachau Reprisals. An officer named Felix Sparks was brought in front of Patton to answer for what happened. And Patton's response? On record, he told Sparks, "I've had these charges investigated, and they're a bunch of crap. You've been a damn fine soldier. You go on home. Case closed. No consequences. So now you have the full picture." Sicily, 1943. The Ardennes, January 1945. Dachau, April 1945. 3 separate incidents, 3 years apart. And in every single one, the same instinct from the same general. Protect the men, protect the Army's image, bury the paperwork. This is what Patton really thought about war crimes committed by his own side. Not that they didn't happen. Not that they were fabricated. Delusional claims by bitter enemies. He knew. He wrote it down himself, in his own hand, in a diary he never expected historians to read. And maybe that's the most unsettling part of this whole story. Patton wasn't lying to the public about some grand cover-up scheme. He was simply doing what he believed, deep down, any commander in his position should do. Protect his own, keep the war effort moving, and let the moral reckoning happen somewhere else, some other time, for someone else to sort out. The Malmedy Massacre eventually got its justice, of a kind. The Dachau trials in 1945 and 1946 convicted dozens of the SS men responsible, including Joachim Peiper himself, sentenced to death. Though even that ending is complicated, most of those sentences were later commuted. And by the mid-1950s, the men responsible for Malmedy were walking free. But the American soldiers who executed prisoners at Chenogne and Dachau, no war crimes trial, no public reckoning, just a diary entry that says, "I hope we can conceal this." And for 70 years, that hope mostly came true. It only came to light because historians and journalists, when digging through Patton's own papers, held today at the Library of Congress, and found the sentence sitting there in plain sight, undisturbed, exactly where he left it. So here's the question worth sitting with. We remember Patton as a general who slapped a soldier and got publicly humiliated for it. But the moment he privately admitted his own army had committed something close to a war crime, he asked for silence, and largely got it. What does that tell you about which sins of war get remembered and which ones get quietly folded into a diary and left for someone else to find decades later?